Hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everybody. Is anyone there?
We're here, Professor.
Hey, good morning. All righty, I'm relieved. Suddenly, burst of greetings from multiple people. Good morning, Anna. Good morning, Ethan. Good morning, Tyra. Now, I was, because of the storm overnight, there was, I was just concerned, something might have been knocked off. I mean, computers, audio. One thing's for sure, my computer's audio is working fine. All righty, so uh, so we were talking about asset management ratios last time, but before I go get back to that, let me just quickly check how many people are in today's forum, and it shows 7 people. It shows 7 people, and I have 7 people, so the numbers match. All righty. I must be sharing. Am I not sharing? Yeah, I'm sharing my screen, so that's why it looks like that. Yeah, so we were talking about actually, inventory turnover ratio. I'm going to come back to average collection period later because it's a bit average collection period belongs to both category in a way. I mean, it belongs to both. It can belong to both. It can belong to both asset management category as well as the liquidity ratio category. But since we so let me continue with inventory turnover ratio, because that was where that's what we left off in our last class. So let me open my whiteboard. Where's my pen? Okay. All righty. So basically, last time I went over all these, process, right? I mean, I'm what inventory turnover ratio, how it is how it came about, right? First of all, the inventory turnover means, how many times the inventory is replaced, right? Turnover means, for example, you have, very often you hear customer turnover ratio, customer turnover. What does that mean? What does customer turnover mean? I mean, if you have a business, right? Per day or per month, how many customers you don't want the same customers to just occupy your if you're a restaurant, right? If you run a restaurant, you don't want the same customer taking up the same table for the whole day, right? Don't you? Of course, if you are at Starbucks, it's quite normal that you see a customer just sipping coffee for the customer ordered just a cup of coffee, and then Americano or whatever, sipping coffee, sitting at the table, and the table can be, it's a four-person table, four people, a table that four people can sit, but just this one single customer sitting there, sipping coffee, occupying that table, sipping coffee for 1 hour. Obviously, this is not good for business, isn't it right? This is not good for business. Unless you're not getting. I mean, unless you don't get customers, uh, unless you don't get that many customers per day. But if you are in a very busy street, and then you are very busy normally, you got like thousands of customers per day. But if one and they need to sit, for example. I mean, if it is Starbucks or Dunkin' Donut, they can just grab coffee and go. But if your business requires sitting down, then you would hate someone who just occupies the like six-person table, right, for hours and hours over just a cup of coffee. Of course, in the U.S., this one happened this one happened that much, but in Europe this happens a lot, because I was in Barcelona a couple of years ago, and I went to this tapas place. I mean, it's a great. I really loved food there. It's a wonderful place, and I forgot the name of the place, but it's a it's a tourist spot, but locals know more. Locals come, uh, so the place is very busy. I think the name was like uh, Castellana or Castellana, something like, because Barcelona is in Castilla uh, region of Spain. Castilla. Um, and then, so I was, the my host, Airbnb host, tipped me. So I went to that place, but there was already a long queue. It was about dinner time, obviously long queue, and a lot of people in the restaurant, a lot of people in the sidewalk, in the outside, tables, sidewalk tables. And you would be lucky if the table opens up. Um, so average wait was like something like 30 minutes. Wait time was. So everyone is getting impatient if you are. But I saw, and people generally, after their meal they leave. But there was this couple, taking, of course, a young man and a young woman, and sitting in the outside table. Of course, it's not good to uh, push the customers away, but they were sitting there. Just they ordered only two beer. That's all, two glasses of beer, and smoking over the beer, and they sat there, just kept on smoking, kept on sipping on the beer for hours, almost hours, because all the while I was waiting in the line, all the other customers were leaving. They paid, they left, they were still there. Now think about it from the restaurant owner's perspective. restaurant owner's perspective, right? They that would be the least welcomed customer, right? The kind of people would be the least. They don't, they didn't eat any food. They didn't order any food. They just. Uh, so from the restaurant owner's perspective, they make their tables, right? They make the table turnover ratio very low. Okay, you get the idea what turnover is, right? Other customers, it's the same table during 2 hours, right? During a 2 hour span, it's a restaurant, so customers, maybe a table can be occupied for about 30 minutes or 45 minutes. But if the same customers occupied a table for 2 hours without ordering any food or without ordering, uh, if they keep ordering more food, then wonderful. I mean, you wouldn't mind as a restaurant owner, but they ordered just, let's say, fish and chips and sat there for 2 hours, occupied the table for 2 hours. That would for you know that would make your blood boil, right? That would make you very impatient, right? If you're the restaurant owner, and if it is, if you have only like four tables in your small restaurant, and this group, this couple sat there occupying the table for 2 hours, you wouldn't, obviously, uh, you wouldn't, like that kind of customers. But you understand now what is the turnover ratio, right? If they during a 2 hour span, if four groups of customer came in and they sat at the same table, one after each other, right? And so they occupied a table for 30 minutes, right? Each group, right? Then you can say, turnover ratio, table turnover ratio is 4. I mean, during, if you operate for 8 hours, right? If a table turns over 16 times, right? That means, uh, there were, 16 groups of customers occupying the table, right? So that gives you an idea about, what turnover ratio is. Then inventory turnover. Now you can understand that what inventory turnover. Uh, kind of like a blessing in disguise. Now. Yeah, yeah. Please limit your time to 1 hour. Yeah. No, the restaurants are now, they have turned. Actually, they're not serving only the customers that come in, but they deliver. And still, a lot of restaurants rely on you know order by call, so they deliver. Where was I? So now, if you understand, that would give you the idea of turnover. So inventory turnover means how many times your merchandise inventory, right? Merchandise, finished goods, right? So it's a retailer. It's the concept of, it's the retailer's concept. Of course, um, manufacturers also have uh, this concept, but for manufacturers, it would be more likely to be about the raw material. Now, so that's why I started with, think about it, beginning inventory. Uh, uh, come on. No. Okay. Uh, beginning inventory. And what did I say? Beginning inventory. Suppose, you had beginning inventory of 5K. We assumed on average, right? Average monthly sale 20K, right? And we assumed, a month for operating period, right? But I've been telling you, standard operating cycle, operating period is quarterly, right? So you started out this month with the 5K of beginning inventory. Obviously, it's not enough. It's lacking, because if average monthly sale is 20K, that means you would have to order at least 15K, right? You would have to have at least 15K more, 15K plus, to be able to meet your monthly sale or monthly, demand, right? Monthly demand by the customers. And then, so you have to order additional merchandise for 15K. That's called, what did I say? What's it called? It's called net purchase. Net purchase, right? So you have then so many things. Then altogether, you have like 20K plus, right? And what did I say this is called?
Ending inventory.
Yeah, everything is inventory, right? Beginning inventory, net purchase is all inventory, right? But then this beginning inventory plus net purchase, the sum of those two numbers, what's that called? What should it be called?
Is that your ending?
No, you haven't ended the month yet. I mean, if you still have 20K at the end of the month, then what do you mean you made no sale?
Right, you made nothing. Okay.
And this is called
That's
what? So,
good available for sale. Goods
yeah,
available.
Say that again. Once again, say it again.
Goods available for sale.
Yes. And who was that? Who said
Janet.
that?
Janet.
Yes, Janet. I'm gonna give you 0.25 for that. Yes, literally. Think about it. It's all logical reasoning, right? Because that's, if you have 20K to meet your customer's order for the month, that's literally the merchandise you have ready to sell. To put it in another way, it's goods available for sale. And goods available for sale is the official terminology, right? Yes, thank you, Janet. Goods available for sale. Okay. Now then, what should happen next? So you have 20K worth of merchandise, and what's supposed to happen next?
You're supposed to actually sell it now.
Yeah. Sale must happen next. Okay. And who said that?
Richard.
Okay, Richard. Okay, I'm giving you 0.25 for that. Yeah, sale must happen. So let's say And when you sell this, this is exactly revenue, right? This is, let's say you sold, 18K. Okay, you sold 18K. This is exactly revenue because why? You are a retail business, right? And in retail, all inventory is expressed uh, in price, selling price, right? In other words, when when I said beginning inventory is 5K, that means because you are actually counting. Let's say there are the computers. Let's say you have computers in the store, only 5K. That's ridiculous. But let's say not computers, but let's say you have you're selling. What are you selling? You're selling like tennis balls, right? And tennis balls are they sell it in a by in a cylinder, right? In a cylinder, there are like 5 balls in the cylinder. And let's say each cylinder is like $1, right? So if you're selling 20K, that means 20,000 cylinders of tennis balls, right? Um, it's direct exactly. All of these inventory is already valued at its at your selling price, right? And you might wonder what's so special about that? What is so peculiar about that? Well, if you are a manufacturer, you don't record your inventory in selling price. Why? Think about it. I told you, manufacturer's inventory consists mostly of the raw material. Okay? For manufacturers, do you remember I said for manufacturers there are 3 types of inventory? 3 types. Isn't that right? For manufacturers, there is raw material, and there is goods in process and finished goods. Do you remember that? Huh? But even if you don't remember, also this is logical reasoning. Think about it. Logically, a manufacturer will need raw material, right? And so raw material goes into the production process, right? And at the end of the production process, right, the finished goods comes out. Finished goods come out. And while it is still in the production process, they are called goods in process or work in progress. So for manufacturers, it's so logical, right? Logically, you can deduce that. It's not like back in the 1980s, and I was in the industry. After graduating from college, I worked in the industry for a while, and there were times I visited the manufacturer's sites. Of course, even without doing that, so I knew there's raw material. It goes into the production process, right? It goes into the machine, and then they have finished goods. But then, even without visiting the manufacturer's site, something like this you can deduce logically, isn't that right? You can deduce logically. Just because I've never been there, I wouldn't know. But think about it. Anybody with logic, anybody with reasoning ability can come to that conclusion, right? So manufacturer's inventory has three different things, and I told you for manufacturers, the finished goods won't be on their site for long. When they are freshly made out of the production line, then it would be there. But then if it stays on the manufacturer's side for a long time, that means this is a bad business because nobody is buying it. But if this is a hot product, hot item, they'll be out of there right away because, in no time, because the retailers have either already pre-ordered, or if it wasn't even pre-ordered, retailers would, as soon as it comes out, they will ship it out. They order and it will be shipped out, right? So on the manufacturer's side, most of the inventory will be the raw material and goods in process, and very little amount, a very small amount of finished goods. So from manufacturer's perspective, it's only rational to value the inventory at cost. You understand? They value the inventory at cost. But for retail business, your inventory is already the merchandise, finished merchandise, finished goods that are ready to sell. So everything is, this is already, a 5K selling price, net purchase of 15K selling price, 20K selling price. So once the sale happens, it's directly, what's going on? Once the sale happens, it's directly revenue. Okay, I don't need to have circle all the time. And then now let's think about it. After sale, then it's obvious what I'm trying to say. And think about it. And after the sale, at the end of the month, then what is left? We know 2K will be left, and that's called what? What is that called?
Your gross
inventory.
Say that again.
Ending inventory.
Yeah. Who said ending inventory?
Janet.
Okay, Janet. I'll give you another 0.25. And it's called ending inventory. Now, then inventory turnover ratio is basically how many times the inventory turned over. That's what it means. So that means, if your business was very busy, think about it. I'm going to give you, so it is revenue, sales revenue, over average inventory. And then what is the average inventory? How do you calculate average inventory? Average inventory is beginning inventory plus ending inventory divided by 2. That's average inventory. Okay? And think about it. During a regular month, right? During the regular month, your as I said before, during a regular month, I want a nice circle if possible. During a regular month, this is your average sale, right? But in a particular month, let's say somehow this month your sale wasn't 20K. Let's say it was 60K. Right? This month it was 60K. If it was 60K, then what had happened? What has happened? And what should have happened? Obviously, you never expected this. So you started out the month with this, but then suddenly, what's happening? What will happen was it will look like this. This is time. This is inventory level. So it will be in dollars. Oh, come on, give me a break. So inventory level in dollars, right? So at the beginning of the month, let's say you started out with, that's beginning inventory. And then you ordered like 15K. So the total would be 20K. So this is GAS, right? And then you started. But then, normally during the month, during a regular month, you will start out with 20K and your inventory level will gradually or linearly, it will go down like this, gradually. And at the end of the month, right, you will end up with, like 2K, right? That will be your ending inventory, right? Level of ending inventory. That would be the normal pattern of your inventory during a normal month. But during this month, it was very good. So what would have happened? During this month, what has happened was right away, after your merchandise sold very quickly, so you hit the bottom here. Then, what would you do? Oh, we sold out. So we'll just, we'll just be happy with that, and we'll sell no more because we're out. Now, are you gonna be like that? Huh? If this is what happened to your business, oh, we're sold out. We're happy. So this was a good business. So we'll be taking a vacation for the rest of the month. Huh? Is that what you're gonna do? Hmm? Tell me, anybody? I mean, this is a common sense
No.
thing. No, of course not. What would you do? Of course you would. Oh, the business. This is the time. I mean, as they say, uh, what's the expression? I mean, it's like, when the wind is. I mean, there's a tailwind. So you take advantage of the tailwind, then, right? I just forgot that expression. They also say, the tide is high, so this is a time to set sail, or whatever. But then, yeah, once you draw down to the end of your last unit, then I mean, even before that, you will reorder. Isn't that right? You're gonna reorder. Uh, you'll call your vendor, and the vendor will restock. They will replenish your inventory, right? And so you're back to 20K. And then you draw down to the last one of it, still the demand is on. So you reorder, right? You reorder. So back to 20K, and then the month ended with 2K of ending inventory, right? Then, this graph tells you clearly how many times the inventory turned over, right? 3 times. Why? Because with 20K, you couldn't meet the demand of 60K, so you had to reorder or replenish your stock or your inventory 3 times. Therefore, this is why the formula, this will make sense, why the formula is like this. Revenue, this time we sold, where is it? 60K. And your beginning inventory and ending inventory was like, in this example, was it like 7K, right? 7K divided by 2, 3.5K. And if you do this, actually, it's a little different from the graph I showed. It must have turned, if it is like this, the turnover ratio must be more than even 15, right? Don't you think? Simply from the numbers, right? But that's what inventory turnover ratio is. And I said this is the retail method. Retail. If it is this is retail. If it is manufacturing, it's still the same thing, but instead of revenue, you use CGS, right? Divided by average inventory. And then this is, look, you remember CGS is the cost side of the revenue. Cost of the revenue. It's also called cost of revenue. CGS is also cost of revenue. And this, your inventory is expressed in cost basis, right? That's what the manufacturing. So that's the inventory turnover ratio. And if you think about it, if your merchandise, right, inventory, your merchandise is hot, right? Popular, selling item, right? Hot selling item, you will have high inventory turnover ratio. And if your inventory turnover ratio is low, that means your business is very slow. And there's a problem with your merchandise, right? You are carrying merchandise that don't sell, right? A better, shuffle or better, change the composition or the mix of the merchandise you're carrying. Yeah, and of course sometimes I was looking for. I needed this, button, what they call button cell battery. I mean, there's coin cell battery. There are batteries that go into the watch, right? They look like coins. It's called, coin cell battery. But there are very small batteries, like, and they are called button cell battery because it's the size of your collar button, right? If you have a shirt, the button-down shirts have, a button for the collar, to button down the collar. They are very small, right? Aren't they? Compared to a regular button. But sometimes, you need those batteries. So I went to CVS, Walgreens, all over, just all in vain. Because I just had to order it. I had to find it on Amazon. I had to order it on Amazon. Because those things are not selling that often, right? So they don't carry that. Obviously, not a very popular item. The composition of your inventory, right, will tell you very much, very well about, your inventory turnover ratio. If you have, and it's called, type 319 battery, 319. They have like 312, but they don't have 319. And if the CVS had, only 319, 319 batteries, 319 batteries, then obviously their inventory turnover ratio will be very, very low. Now, the next thing is, as since we are doing the asset management category, the next one is fixed assets turnover ratio. Fixed assets turnover ratio. And then turnover ratio is, simple. Revenue over fixed assets. I wonder if they have average fixed assets or just fixed assets. It's just fixed assets. There's also total assets turnover, but you can easily understand that because fixed assets are what? Fixed assets are plant and equipment. Now, if you are a retailer, you wouldn't have fixed assets. I mean, retailers would also have very small amount of fixed assets. For the retailers, fixed assets would be what? It would only be some office equipment like computers, fax machines, telephone, file cabinet. Isn't that right? What other fixed assets would a retailer have? Right? So the retailers also can calculate their fixed assets turnover ratio, but it would be mostly manufacturer. It would mostly be manufacturer that would use fixed assets turnover ratio. But then think about it. You cannot sell fixed assets. Why would you? It's plant and equipment. Why would you do this? Now think about it. Fixed assets are physical capital. Physical capital is literally means of production. You want to know the contribution, how much contribution the fixed asset is making to your sale, to your revenue, right? And you might wonder, they are making 100% contribution. I mean, if it is plant and equipment, without plant and equipment, how can there be any output? Without any output, how can there be any revenue? So they must be making, 100% contribution. Yes, that's true. But then the point is something like this. Think of it this way. Suppose you're a lawyer, right? Suppose you're a lawyer. A lawyer is a service, industry, right? Because providing legal service. So you must have your office, right? But then, what kind of fixed assets do you have? Lawyer wouldn't have any fixed assets. It's just, lawyer's fixed assets will be the computer, fax machine, telephone, and file cabinet. Isn't that right? What else can you think of for a lawyer? Huh? But think about it. If the lawyer is having a good business, if the lawyer gets a lot of case, right? A lot of cases, a lot of clients, a lot of cases. Let's take one item as an example, file cabinet. How much contribution does a file cabinet make? But still, of course, that without the file cabinet, the lawyer would have no way of organizing his case files, managing and keeping his case files. And if his business is very slow, think about it. The file cabinet the file cabinet will open and close. Isn't it right? The file cabinet will hardly open and close. But if the lawyer gets a lot of business, right? A lot of clients, a lot of cases, then what's going to happen? The file cabinet will open and close very frequently. Very frequently. And then eventually the file cabinet will break down, right? Don't you think? If you frequently, open and close, and sometimes you open and close it, slam it, right, to close it. Sometimes, if you do this, like 100 times per day, right? There is a rail, there's the rail system, the file cabinets have rails, and the rollers and rails, and you understand, it will break down. And think about it, when it breaks down, what should the lawyer do? He will have to replace it, or she will have to replace it. Isn't it right? Then think about it. To put it in another way, the file cabinet worked very hard and made a lot of contribution to the lawyer's revenue. Isn't it right? File cabinet worked very hard and made a lot of contribution to the lawyer's revenue. Clearly, without the file cabinet, right? You understand? So if any fixed asset is completely depreciated, what does that mean? It has lived out its service life, right? If any fixed asset has, suppose your shoes, you don't throw away your shoes while it's still good, but you will throw it away when it has a hole. It is all worn and torn, and it has a. But what does that mean? Your shoes served you well. Isn't it right? These days, nobody wears shoes until they wear out. If your shoes are worn and torn, right? They served you well. It's fully depreciated. Isn't that right? And basically, if you're a delivery guy, right? If you're a delivery guy and you deliver on your foot, if your shoes are worn out, you throw it away, buy a new pair of shoes. Basically, that old shoes served you well. It lived out its purpose. Right? So think about it. File cabinet, if it broke down and it got replaced, it served its purpose, it lived out its full service life, and it made full contribution to the lawyer's income. Does that make sense? If the lawyer gets no business, the business is slow, the file cabinet will never get replaced. The file cabinet will never turn over. But this file cabinet turned over, let's say, 5 times a year. That means the file cabinet worked very hard, contributed to the income of the revenue of the lawyer, right? It's the measure of how the asset is effectively and efficiently used, right? And increase, used, for productive purpose. It was, literally is a measure of the productivity of your fixed assets. Okay, does that make sense, everyone? Come on, there are 7
Yeah.
people. Okay, Janet. All right, thank you. Nobody else then. everyone else, everyone else is in like sleep mode or away mode. Away. Huh? But that's what the fixed assets turnover ratio is. It looks like my connectivity is poor, but can everyone hear me well?
I can hear
Can
you.
everyone? Okay, great. What about
Yes,
other people?
Professor.
Okay, thank you, thank you. But then the rest of the people are in away mode. I just noticed that something's not right with my connect. But well, anyway, so that's what the fixed assets turnover ratio is, and then that will explain what total assets turnover ratio is. Okay, so next is debt management ratio. Okay, next category is debt management ratio, and we have uh, two ratios in this category. I mean, there are more, but at least 3. But we'll look into the most representative 2. That's what I said at the beginning, right? So in the debt management category, right? In the debt management category, there's times interest earned, and then there is total debt to total assets ratio. Total debt to total assets ratio. And this is easy. I mean, this is obvious. Total debt to total assets ratio is called, debt ratio, simply, debt ratio, or leverage ratio, leverage. And leverage is, use of debt. Use of debt is called leverage. And it's, if you understand the capital structure, if you understand what capital structure is, and I talked about capital structure, this is obvious. It's part of the capital structure. We know part of the capital structure because capital is either debt and equity. Capital is debt and equity, right? Obviously, if the equity is 60% of the total assets, the debt will be 40% of it. That's that ratio. That's not, I'm gonna come back to why it's called leverage, but let's think about what times interest earned is. And the times interest earned ratio, and I use, you might wonder, what is that? Why is it X? Shouldn't it be T? I told you, this is not X, this is times, literally. And one of the things, N times interest earned ratio is EBIT over interest payment. EBIT over interest payment. And why is it called times interest? And this was something, as you know, when I was when I was a young grad student, then as an undergrad, I was a liberal arts major, so I had no idea, as a young, as an undergrad. But as a grad student, early stage of my graduate school, looking at this term, times interest earned ratio, I had a hard time understanding what it meant, because I thought that times meant something chronological time. So what does it have to do with time? I mean, is there a time frame for this? I mean, how much interest is earned during a interest is not something you pay, but later only later I realized interest is something you have to pay, but it has to come out of. It's something you have to pay to the bond holders, right? Or debt holders, your creditors. But it's something that has to come out of EBIT. Isn't that right? Interest must come out of the EBIT. So then that means your EBIT, or the operating profit, of course, must be greater than interest rate, your interest payment. Isn't that right? Your operating profit, or EBIT, must be many times, right? Multiple times greater than interest payment. Otherwise, suppose this ratio is 1, right? Suppose this ratio is 1. If this ratio is 1, what does that mean? You're dead. Isn't that right? If this ratio is 1, you barely make the interest payment, nothing left. Nothing left. So if this ratio is 1, you'll just pay the interest, and there's nothing left, no earnings left to pay taxes. Therefore, nothing left for net profit or earnings after taxes. Right? Make sense? Make sense? Does that make sense? Everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. So that means this ratio must be way greater than 1. It must be much more greater than 1, right? You must make the interest payment and still have something left, so that you will pay and have something left for the equity holders, right? Then what should this number be like? I mean, being greater than 1, is that enough? No, it's not enough, of course. So question is, what should this number be? You must compare it with the industry average, right? Always the rule of thumb is the industry average. If the industry average times number for this is 3, if the industry average is 3, well, what am I doing? Well, I lost it. Yeah. Yeah. no. At least at least it's not gone. Yeah. What if the industry average is 3, right? Of course, if industry average is 3, yeah. If your times interest earned ratio is at least 3, then you're good. If your number is above the industry average, then you're good. You're in good shape. If you're below industry average, if your number is below industry average, then you're not in good shape. You better raise this ratio. And in reality, there are many companies that whose times interest earned ratio is not even 1. And they are really, really in big trouble. That means they will default, right? Makes sense. And Evergrande, you heard of Evergrande, right? Earlier this month and even September, Evergrande was a big talk of the town, right? Big talk of the market. Why? It's a big, huge, property developer in China, and the whole eye of the world was, whether they will go bankrupt or not, and whether the ramification will be global. The ramification wouldn't be limited. Would be limited. It wouldn't be global because they are not that globally borrowing. But anyway, the company didn't go bankrupt. They made payments. I mean, they didn't anyway. The thing is, also, you remember, debt to total assets ratio is called the leverage ratio. Times interest earned ratio is also called coverage ratio. Coverage ratio, or debt services ratio. Right? But again, this is a very think about it. Times interest earned, and accrued interest is part of the current liabilities. And I've been telling you, companies don't go bankrupt because of the long-term debt. Companies can go bankrupt because they default in the short-term debt, in current liabilities. Okay, so this is a very crucial ratio to tell whether the company will go bankrupt in the short run or not. Whereas total debt to total assets ratio is a long-term measure. In the long term, for example, their capital structure is not like this, but if their capital structure is like 70%, 30%, right? 70% debt, 30% equity. In the long run, they are they are likely to. I mean, this is not good. Their financial distress. Their financial distress will be very high, right? All right, makes sense. Now, it's 10:42, and I believe this is a good time to take a break. Refresh yourself. Let's take a 10-minute break and reconvene at like 10:52. Okay? All right. See you at 10:53.
Okay.
All right. All right, we're back. We're back. We're back. So I hope everyone is back too. um, I have 8 people. Yeah. As before, let me check. Our discussion board has, our today's forum has, I see 11 people. And out of these 11, I see only 8 in the collaborate. Um, well, anyway, so the next, let's talk about just one more ratio. I mean, in the debt management category, there are actually, cash coverage ratio, and fixed charge coverage ratio, et cetera, right? Uh, but two most representative is times interest earned and debt ratio, right? Uh, so I I said uh, the times interest earned ratio is also called coverage ratio or debt services ratio. Uh, it's called coverage ratio. But then what is the cash coverage ratio? I mean, how is it different from just coverage ratio? Well, you remember times interest earned is only EBIT over interest payment, right? Okay. Uh, however, okay, what's going on? Okay, that's fine. EBIT is not the EBIT is not all of the cash flow. EBIT is not. You remember um, when we talked about free cash flow, right? The difference between free cash flow, if you remember free cash flow, uh, free cash flow is actually operating cash flow minus investment in operating capital, right? And uh, operating cash flow is something like operating profit. But the difference is it's like, right, uh, operating profit, right? Which is, EBIT, right? Another name for operating profit is EBIT. But how is it different from operating profit? Well, the difference is you remember operating cash flow is EBIT minus taxes plus depreciation, right? Remember, you add back the depreciation in it, right? You add back it. You what should I say? You add back depreciation back into it. Um, why? Because depreciation is additional source of cash, right? Remember that? It's cash preserved, actually. So if you want a cash coverage ratio, I mean, all of the cash flow available, then you'll have to add depreciation back in there. And then that's called cash coverage ratio. Okay, that's cash coverage ratio. Okay, so always keep in mind, depreciation is additional source of cash flow, not because it is cash paid in, but because it is cash non-cash outflow or cash preserved. Okay, so when you have to muster up everything, when you have to gather everything, grab everything, right? Grab everything, every last, pinch every last penny, right? You have to always, add depreciation back in there, add that back into EBIT, back to it. Okay, so that's cash coverage ratio. And finally, the last category is debt management ratio. I'm sorry, market valuation ratio. Market valuation. Okay, maybe I should. This looks a bit okay. Valuation rate category, right? Valuation ratio categories. Valuation category, and there are two most represented: price earnings ratio and market price to book value ratio. Now, when we say price, so of course there's stock price, but market price of the stock. It's P, symbol P always means market price. Okay, market price of the stock, and E means earnings per share. Okay. If you think about it, this is kind of counterintuitive. Why? Counterintuitive. Why? Think about it. I've been telling you all the ratios are basically like output to input ratio. Output to input, right? Remember gas mileage, right? Gas mileage. Gas mileage. It's hard to write. It's a typical example of output to input ratio, right? And in gas mileage, it's how many miles? It's how many miles per gallon, right? Per gallon of gas. It's miles over gallon, right? And gallon is input, miles is output. In this case, which one is input? If you think about it, this is the input. Isn't it right? And this is the output. Isn't it right? Because earnings per share is the profit per share. Earnings per share is the profit per share, right? And that's what you get when you own the stock. And market price is what you paid, right? So that's your input. So you might, and earnings per share is the output. So it would be more intuitive it will be more intuitive if it is the reciprocal. In other words, if it is the if it is the earnings per share over price, that makes more sense. Isn't it right? That makes more sense, right? And then earnings per share, actually, there's a name for that. This is called actually earnings yield. This is called earnings yield. Actually, yield, you should know by now, yield is another name for return, right? Yield is another name for rate of return, but annualized, always annualized, right? Basically, it's earnings. It should be earnings price ratio. I mean, that would make more sense because it's like output to input. But and think about it. Earnings per share. If you put a time subscript, this is price at time 0. This is earnings per share at time 1. Why? When you buy the stock, you buy the stock at time 0. That's when you start, right? So the price, you pay the price at time 0. But earnings per share will be the result of that stock, the performance of the stock, one period later, like a quarter after, or a year after. Right? Makes sense. You cannot have earnings right when you buy the stock because the company will have to operate and produce result. It will take time. Until then, it will take time. So if we put a time subscript, right, it's earnings per share at time 1 and price at time 0. Okay. So is everyone clear about that? Nobody. I don't know if you guys are. Seems like some of you are on away mode, right? And most, hopefully, not. But all of you seem to be on away
I'm
mode.
here, Master. I get it. I'm just a little noisy.
Alrighty. Who was this?
Anna.
Okay, Anna. All right. Thank you for responding. The other people are all, like asleep or away. Anyway, so the idea. So then think about it. The reciprocal of this, which is right, raised to -1, which will be the reciprocal, will be exactly price earnings ratio, right? And so, but as I said, earnings yield or earnings price ratio is more intuitive, and then price earnings ratio is more rather counterintuitive. Why would they use price earnings ratio? Well, we in the U.S. we tend to think output to input ratio is more intuitive. It seems more. Why? Because it's the productivity. It's output per input, right? So it seems like it captures the essence of productivity very well. But then from if you go to other countries, most other countries, Europe, East Asia. I don't know about Australia, but gas mileage for them, for other countries, is um, not miles per gallon, but they use inverse gas mileage. Okay, you understand what I'm saying? And if you're an international student, you would easily understand what I'm talking about, because in most other countries, the gas mileage is liters. How many liters per kilometer? Right? This is their gas mileage. So it's like the reciprocal of this, right? U.S. gas mileage. It's the reciprocal of the U.S. gas mileage. And then, why is it like that in those countries? And if you think about it, most other countries are non-oil producers, right? There aren't that many countries that produce oil, and I said this at some point. U.S. is the largest oil producer in the world. Actually, large has the highest capability of oil production. U.S. has the largest oil reserve, the greatest oil reserve in the world. U.S. just doesn't drill as much, right? Not only in the U.S. I told you, back in the early 2000s, during Obama administration, right? During Obama administration, they discovered shale oil. Shale is, some people misunderstand it as Shell. Shell is a company, British Petrol and Shell. Those are, oil companies. Shale is a geological layer, underground, layer, and usually offshore, right? So the seabed, the ocean bed, right? For example, East Coast, West Coast, of the U.S. coastline, right? The coastline sea floor doesn't just drop, like 1,000 feet off the coast. It's a slow or of relatively slowly declining the depth of the seabed, ocean floor is slowly declining from the coast to the deepest point in the ocean, right? And so it's gradually declining, right? And so there's a vast area off the coastline, right? From coastline probably about 20 miles, 30 miles, 50 miles, I don't know, maybe 100 miles, up to 100 miles, the ocean floor is, slowly and gradually going down, right? Downhill, right? And then that in that gradually downsloping seabed, right? Under the seabed is a geological layer called shale layer, and that's where there's a lot of reserve of oil. And U.S. has a lot of this, and also inland. Texas, Oklahoma, these were the states when early to 20th century they hit oil. Late 19th century and early 20th century they hit oil, and they drilled a lot of oil. Um, and even in Pennsylvania, there are oil fields. You may not, you may have never, but that's called fracking. They drill, they pump up the oil through the process called fracking, which is bad for the actually environment and bad for the underground water system. And I think a lot of sinkholes are a result of fracking, right? When underground water system is disturbed, there's underground water system, but it is being uh, it's being diverted, or uh, when you dig up the ground, this underground water system gets disturbed, and then sometimes where the water must be, right? You dig up somewhere, and then the water gets drained somewhere, and then what happens to the layer of earth, right, where there used to be underground water? It gets hollow because water is being drained, uh, to divert it and drained to somewhere else. But what happens? This hollow vacuum or hollow space underground will have to collapse, right? That's what causes sinkhole. So fracking in Pennsylvania, there used to be a lot of fracking, and then they are not anymore. On a small scale, there were a lot of frackings, but not as much now as before. Why? Because cost effectiveness. It looks like the output of those wells, oil wells, wasn't sufficient to cover the cost, right? I mean, as they pump out oil, and of course, then think about it. Early on, you make money, but as time goes on, there's less and less oil being sucked out, less and less oil. Then it cannot. At some point, the revenue, the cost will exceed the revenue. The cost will exceed the revenue, right? And obviously they can't produce as much oil. Okay. All right. So what was I? U.S. is the biggest, oil producer in the world, actually. But U.S. isn't exploiting all of the resources. U.S. is keeping it in store. So in the future, right, when all the Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, most Middle Eastern countries, they are the main oil producers. Of course, there's UK has oil in the North Sea. I mean, Norway. I mean, they are basically Norway and UK share the same like area of underground. Undersea oil reserve or oil field. And otherwise, Venezuela is another oil producing country, but otherwise it's Middle East, and they will be exhausted. I mean, Middle Eastern oil will be exhausted one day, right? Once it is all sucked up, then it will be dry. Then U.S. will still be the last one standing with oil, right? But anyway, think about it. Other than the U.S. and some oil-producing countries, most other countries don't have any oil. For them, oil must be imported, all 100% import. So oil is a precious reserve, a precious resource. Oil is a precious resource, and it's very costly. The whole industry, their economy depends on it. So from most other countries' perspective, for them, it's more important to know how many liters is being used for running 1 kilometer, right? Does that make sense? For them, that's what's more important. In other words, how much input is used for a given output, right? Given unit of output. That's more important. So that's why they use inverse gas mileage, right? So then, think about it. For us, for U.S., for the U.S. Citizens or U.S. motorists, U.S. gas mileage, right? The higher this number, the better it is. The better it is, isn't that right? But for the rest of the world, who uses inverse gas mileage, the lower this number, the better it is. So it's the same thing if you think about it. I was talking about the price earnings ratio, but the price earnings ratio is the reciprocal of earnings yield. And earnings yield, think about it, earnings yield is output to input ratio, exactly, output to input ratio. Whereas price earnings ratio is input to output ratio. So if it is output to input ratio, always, it is quite obvious. The higher this number, the better it is. The higher this number, the better it is. But then, why? Because there's more output, right, for the input. For the price you pay, there's more earnings per share. On the other hand, if you use price earnings ratio, which is the reciprocal, of the earnings yield, the lower this number, right? And the lower this number, the better it is. Actually, the lower this number, that means the stock is value stock, meaning the lower this number, the stock is cheaper for its earnings, right? It's called value stock. I mean, think about it. You bought a stock for $100. Suppose you have two stocks, right? Two stocks, stock A or stock X. And the price of stock X is two stocks. Price of stock Y. They are both $100. And then earnings per share of stock X and earnings per share of stock Y, right? This is all logical reasoning. Earnings per share of stock X is $20. Earnings per share of stock Y is, let's say, $1. Which stock would you prefer? Huh? Tell me. Between stock X and Y, which stock would you prefer? Anybody?
X.
Is it Stock X. Who said that? Stock X?
Anna.
Anna? Okay, Anna. Of course. Anna, you got, 0.25. Yeah. Unless you are, you know, unless you were born yesterday, right? Unless you were born yesterday. Um, Even if you were
Professor.
born yesterday, huh?
Professor, that formula is the one where so it's like $20 for every $1 that you put in, right?
Yes, exactly. Think about it. And then think about the price earnings ratio here. If the price earnings rate, so here, uh, uh, okay, let me put it. Maybe I can put it. I should put it like this. Then price earnings ratio of X. Price earnings ratio of X is 5, isn't that right? And not 5, 1 over 5, right? Price earnings ratio of Y, it will be what? 100. So clearly, this is much higher price earnings ratio, but which stock is better? Which stock gives you a better return? Clearly, this stock gives you a better return. Isn't that right? The lower the number, right? Right? The lower the price earnings ratio, it means it's more value stock. In other words, for the price, for the same price, you would prefer something. You would prefer a stock that pays that pays more earnings, right? That gives you more return, right? You would prefer this rather than this one, rather than the stock that for the same price, it gives you only $1 profit. Obviously, stock X is better. So stock X is a value stock, but then they call stock Y, which is quite obviously speculative, right? It's speculative. And in other words, there's a lot of bubble, right? But this is called growth stock, growth. But again, I said this in Finance 300. High price earnings ratio is, there are two camps in finance. The camp that champions low price earnings ratio and the camp that champions high price earnings ratio. So the proponents of low price earnings ratio, it's obvious. We understand. It's very logical, right? Because dollar for dollar, pound per pound, right? The higher earnings make sense, right? For the price, but then the proponents of the high price earnings ratio are saying that basically, look, even if the earnings per share of this stock is only $1, the only reason, if the $100 price is still supported, the only reason for that is because this has a high growth potential. Still, because of the high growth potential, they are still, the market is still supporting this outrageous price. Otherwise, there's no reason. Of course, then, that high growth potential is called also, present value of growth opportunity. But no matter what they call present value of growth opportunity, but no matter what they call it, it can turn either, one way or the other. It can turn one way or the other. One, it can be a success. In other words, it can take off, literally. In other words, it turned out to be really a growth stock, and the prophecy came true, right? Prophecy came, or it could be a flop, nothing but a flop. In other words, in that case, it was 100% bubble. Everything was bubble, right? So then, although, so in other words, they all justified mathematically, but the conclusion is, if it takes off, right? But how many of these high price earnings ratio stocks will really take off, right? I would say Tesla was a typical of this. Tesla was a typical case of this. Tesla was a typical case of, and even until Tesla is still overvalued, but even until the early 2019, it was way, way overvalued. It was, and then it's just like Bitcoin. Look, Bitcoin. There's no reason for Bitcoin to be $60,000 because Tesla. At least Tesla makes cars, and when they really make their cars are sold, they make a lot of sale, right? They sell a lot of cars. Actually, they will have a concrete profit, right? So even if the price earnings ratio is 100 or 200, in early 2019, the price earnings ratio was 200. That means if you pay $200, you get only $1 earnings per share. It was $1,600, so if the ratio is like 200, then for $1,600, right? 1% of so $8, you get only $8 earnings per share, right? If price earnings ratio was 200, it was like that. And even prior to that, their price earnings ratio was almost infinite. Like even until Tesla started out in like 2012, 2010 or 2012. Even until 2000, say like 2012, 2014, they didn't have any profit. They didn't make any profit, right? And so you might wonder, even until like 2016, so they didn't sell any cars? No, yes, they did. They sold cars, but their EBIT, you remember, EBIT from sale of their EBIT was less than interest, right? In other words, they had huge debt. Their capital structure was probably like 30% equity, 20% equity, 80% debt, or something. So, so they were, and then even if they had positive, let's say, even if it was like this, right? They had a lot of, they didn't, and they had, EAT, right? The earnings after taxes, net profit was not that big. So, and then they reinvested all of that into their expanding their production capacity. And most of that capital came from debt. So they had huge, like interest to pay. Um, but anyway, the point is, Tesla turned out to be a success, takeoff. But how many companies are like that? Most of them will turn out to be a flop, right? Um, there is, how do you know? So if you cannot, so in other words, it is very solid. I mean, if the price earnings ratio is low, it's a solid indicator that the company is profitable and the stock is undervalued, right? Think about it. For giving you $20 profit for such a stock to sell for $100 is clearly undervalued. I mean, but then this kind of stock for giving you $1 earnings, if the price is $100, is clearly we're out of time. It's clearly a crazy thing. So,
Professor,
yeah.
a quick question for a growth company though, shouldn't that the price earnings ratio pretty much not completely go out the door, but you can kind of take that into consideration when you're valuing the company, no?
Yeah, of
For a growth
course. Look,
company,
as
actually.
growth firms, growth companies have it's indisputable that the growth firms have high price earnings ratio. But as I said, is it really because of its growth potential, or is it nothing but bubble? Because growth potential is it's just an abstract concept. I mean, potential is something that can materialize or not. If it doesn't materialize, then it's a flop. If it materializes, it takes off, right? So if it doesn't materialize, then it just fizzles. It just fizzles out. It's nothing but a bubble. So is there a way we can tell? We can separate uh, uh, cream of the crop from the rest of them. Is there? Yes. Uh, there's a ratio called PE. PEG ratio. So among the stocks with high price earnings ratio, you will need to use PEG, which is short for price earnings growth ratio, which is basically price earnings ratio over that price earnings ratio over earnings growth rate. So think about it. It's quite common sense concept if you think about it. So the price earnings ratio is, let's say, 100. That's like $1. But then earnings growth rate has been 100%. So that means earnings per share at time 0 and earnings per share at time between the two, right, there has been 100% growth, right? The growth is, growth was 100%. Now, wouldn't that be a wonderful company? I mean, earnings per share, in other words, profit grew 100% over 1 year, right? If the profit grew 100% over 1 year, this company is growing, doubling every year. I mean, if the growth rate, earnings growth rate is every year is like 100%, they are doubling every year, doubling. The profit is doubling every year. So in that case, this earnings growth rate is supporting this high price earnings ratio. So if this PEG ratio, if it is like this, it doesn't have to be exactly 1, but if it is 100, ignore the percentage. I mean, 100% is only 1, right? So ignore the percentage, right? Ignore this percentage, and just take the ratio of these two numbers. And if it is 1, that high price earnings ratio is justified, right? Make sense? Otherwise, it's not justified. Okay. If it is 2, 3, it's not justified, right? That's overblown, right? It's so that's price earnings ratio. We have then market price to book value ratio. We can it's 11:41, so we'll take a 10-minute break and come back at 11:51, and we'll continue. I mean, next we'll go into a Dupont chart, which is a Dupont system, which is a very interesting way of looking at ratios. Okay, all righty. So let's take a 10-minute. Yeah, I'll see you guys. All right, we're back. We're back. So now, okay. So the next is market price to book value ratio, right? Market price to book value. Now you all understand there is a difference between, I've been telling you over and over, there are three types of prices. One is, market price. The other one is book value. It's rather called book value per share. And I told you P, the symbol P is always, the symbol P always means market price. Now, book value means book value per share. And there are three prices, book value, market price, book value, and intrinsic value. And the main difference is market price is the actual price, which is determined by demand and supply. So market price is kind of spot price, price on the spot, the real time. But then again, market price can be mispricing. Market can be mispricing the stock because a lot of times in the short run, market is not rational in the short run. In other words, investors are not rational in the short run, and investors tend to trade by noise. A lot of times they get triggered by noise. So in the short run, it's irrational, clearly. So that's why we need a solid reference point, and the solid reference point is book value. But then the downside of the book value is that the book value always tends to be based on the past data, right? We can't have companies update their books. In other words, the companies update their financial statements quarterly. Okay, only quarter. What I'm saying is, companies release their data updated. They release the updated data quarterly, right? Didn't I tell you? A publicly traded company, meaning companies that sold stock in the stock market and listed in the stock exchange, right? They have an obligation required by law to provide their financial information, right? To disclose their financial information to the public, to the market. And that goes without saying, because if they are selling stocks in the market, if they sell stocks in the market, they should disclose their financial situation transparently. There must be transparency, right? Otherwise, if they are very secretive, right? Who is going to buy their stocks, right? And besides, it can be misleading if they are sending out misleading only, only the data that is only favorable to them. There can be no transparency in the market, right? So SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, has it's law. By the law, Security Exchange Commission requires all the publicly traded companies, the companies that are listed in the stock market, to disclose their financial information, financial data, without any shadow of any doubt. But again, how often do they disclose it? Quarterly. They have to do it quarterly and annually, right? Well, anyway, and I've been telling you over and over, the basic operating cycle or basic operating period is quarter. So at the end of every quarter, they will have to close the book, meaning, they will have to compile all the data, update the data, and release the data to the financial market. Um, uh, so, but that doesn't mean that they don't update the data every day or every week. They do it internally for their own internal uh, internal purposes, right? They collect the data every day, but they don't they don't update. In other words, uh, they don't do a final large scale update until the end of the quarter, right? And it is not even required, right? I mean, reporting their financial data, reporting their earnings, right? Um, uh, Quarterly is what is required, not out of not more frequently than that, not more frequently than that. And the companies that are not listed in the stock market, companies that are not publicly traded, don't even have to do that because they are not under any obligation because they're not selling stocks to the public. But the ones that are selling stocks to the public, they must disclose this data every quarter. Okay. But then that means the book value is updated every quarter. So the book value, we are in the fourth quarter, but the most updated book value, most updated data is as of end of the third quarter, right? And it's going to be end of the third quarter until we reach the end of the fourth quarter, and the data is not uh, end of the fourth quarter is December 31st, but that doesn't mean you have the fourth quarter data at the end of December 31st. December 31st will have to end, and then they will compile the data and release the data only in January, right? It will be only in January. So fourth quarter data will be available only in the first quarter of the next year, and until then, our most updated data is as of the third quarter, end of the third quarter, which is September 30th, right? Does that make sense? So that's why I'm saying book value is always past, right? It's past data. Book value is always past data, not the most recent data. But that's the solid data. So then, until January, as far as the fourth quarter actual data is concerned, we are in a vacuum, right? We are all in a vacuum because the companies haven't published them yet. So that's why, intrinsic value is needed. Intrinsic value is all based on the future cash flow, expected future cash flow, okay, discounted to present. But we can tell, one thing we can tell is that the market price to book value ratio, there are three possibilities. It could be greater than 1 or equal to 1 or less than 1, right? Makes sense? And then obviously, if the company is doing well, the company made a lot of profit last quarter, and there are all, positive news about the company, right? The market price to book value ratio, and the book value is book value per share, of course, This means book value per share, okay? Because book value of equity, book value is book value of equity, and it's an aggregate total equity number, total equity value. So book value means book value per share. So think about it. If the price, this ratio is greater than 1, then there's a lot of positive expectation about this company, right? And if this ratio is less than 1, the market has formed a very adverse expectations about this company, negative expectations about this company. If it is equal to 1, then the price is justly valued. They say it's justly valued. But then if it's greater than 1, then they say overvalued. But does that really mean it's just by number it's overvalued? But it may not be really overvalued. Why? There may be a good reason why. There must be a good. Obviously, all that positive expectations of the company is pushing up the market price, and you have to again look at the PEG ratio. I mean, obviously, if the price is high, market price is way higher than book value, then you got to check the price earnings ratio, and price earnings ratio must be is it high compared to the industry average? Is it higher than the compare? Is it higher than the industry average? And then if it is higher than the industry average, then you got to check the PEG ratio. And if the PEG ratio is 1, it's solid. There is no doubt that the price. There is no reason to doubt the dependability of the price PB ratio to be greater than 1, right? Makes sense? All righty. So that's market price to book value ratio. We have about 10 minutes, but we got to go into the. So we now move on to the Dupont equation. So Dupont equation is the it started out as the relationship between ROA and ROE, ROA and ROE. First of all, let's think about ROA and ROS. Yeah. And this is a very interesting part about the ratio analysis. First of all, let's think about ROA. We all know ROA, return on assets, is profit over. I mean, there are two versions. We know. Let's see. Here they use net income. Actually, net income is. I've been telling you there are two versions of ROA. One, using EBIT, right? Operating profit, because the company is owned by the shareholders, that's for sure. But the company's obligated. There are two camps about the firm, about the objective of the firm, and conventional theory is that the conventional theories holds that the goal of the business is to maximize the shareholder wealth or shareholder value. maximize the shareholder value. But the new theory is, saying the goal of the business is to maximize the stakeholder wealth, stakeholder value, stakeholder. What's the difference? Stakeholder is not just a shareholder, isn't it right? Stakeholder is a broader concept. Think about it. The debt holder is also a stakeholder of the company. Why? Think about it. If you're a debt holder, if you loaned money to the company, or if you are a bond holder, if you bought the bond of the company, you still want the company to be profitable, isn't it right? I mean, if the company isn't doing well, you won't recover your lending, right? Whether you're a creditor or shareholder, it doesn't matter. There will be no bondholder or no creditor that will be indifferent to the success of this company. Isn't that right? If the company is not doing well, it's bad for me too. I won't be able to recover my bonds, my principal, right? I won't be not only, not to mention just the interest, but I won't be able to recover my principal, right? So bondholder is a stakeholder, right? Bondholder has a stake in the success of this company. And then what about the vendors to this company, the company that supplies parts, components to this company, or raw material to this company, right? The companies that are in the supply channel, right? The companies in the supply channel, they certainly the companies who are client to this company, or the companies who are vendors to this company, they are all stakeholders to this company, because if this company fails, they all will be adversely affected. If this company fails, then the vendors will have accounts receivable that won't be paid, right? Makes sense? So, and what about the workers? What about the employees? Employees are also stakeholders. If the company is not doing well, then they will lose their job, right? So the resource providers, basically the resource providers, right? Such as providers of the raw material, vendors, and the providers of labor, they're all stakeholders. Even the government is the stakeholder as well. Think about it. If the government, if this company fails, there will be one less source of tax revenue. Right? Does that make sense? Everyone, are you there? Come on,
We're
Bo.
here.
Yeah, it does.
Only like 2-3 people. I heard three voices, right?
No, we're here. We're here.
Okay, so that makes sense, right? Everyone in the ecosystem of this company, is a stakeholder, right? And so not only the employees, not only the clients, not only the vendors, not only the creditors, not only the stockholders, but even think about it, the business community around this company. I mean, let's say this company is Facebook or Apple, or Facebook is in San Jose. I think all of those tech companies are in San Jose, California, which is like San Francisco area. And think about it, the landlords who are renting their apartments to the employees of these high-tech companies, Facebook or Apple, they are also stakeholders, because if these companies go down, they will lose their tenants, right? And the business community around them, like restaurants, right? These employees will eat, have their lunch or dinner. I mean, Google and Facebook and all these companies have their Apple. They have their own cafeteria in their own campus, so they won't even go up. But think about it. Generally, I mean, be around BMCC, right? The Tribeca area, there are restaurants. Faculty and student would be their major customers, right? And if BMCC goes out of business, then they will lose their business too. They will lose their customers and they'll lose their business too. So the new theory is basically saying that the company, the goal of the firm is not only to serve the maximize the shareholder wealth, but also to maximize the stakeholder wealth. That's the new theory. Okay, so in that sense, this measure of ROA is more relevant, but the second formula is, which is traditional, right? EAT over total assets. But then let's see how this can be tweaked and how this can transform. We are out of time today. Richard always reminded me that it is 12:15, but I'm always cognizant of. Sometimes I forget, but it's 12:16, so it's time to call it a day. So we'll continue from here in the next class. Okay, so have a great rest of the Saturday. Have a great weekend, everyone, and I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay. All righty,
Thank you,
you too. Take
Professor.
care. All righty, take care, Janet. All right, take care, everyone. I'll stop sharing, stop recording, and sign out.